Hello, and welcome to Food in Art, a wonderful opportunity for you to get a taste of how two human concerns, nourishment and beauty, have blended together through the centuries to create masterpieces. I'm art historian Elizabeth Lev, and I hope that you'll enjoy these bite-sized pieces of fun, facts, faith, and beauty about food. Many artists throughout the history of visual representation have worked to make food beautiful. Think of the lovely still lifes, think of joyous banqueting scenes. But there were other artists who took it upon themselves to show the danger of an excessive love of food in representing images of gluttony in paintings of the Last Judgment. The Last Judgment, the last day of the world, when Christ comes back to judge all, good, evil, heaven, hell, became increasingly popular as paintings inside churches as of about the 11th and 12th century. Of these numerous paintings, this one here is a 15th century fresco from the Albi Cathedral in Toulouse. This is a very unusual placement for a Last Judgment because instead of being painted on the interior facade of the church, it occupies the entire casement of a gigantic organ. And as a matter of fact, this Last Judgment covers 200 square meters. It's like a surround sound effect, literally with the organ, with sound, of the last day of the world and the eternity of the punishment. And so the representations in Last Judgment paintings were meant for local audiences, and they usually addressed the most common flaws, foibles, sins, and vices of the local populace. Therefore, in most of these paintings, the ones that would be most visible, placed closer to the eye line of the beholder, would be lust, greed, and gluttony. So gluttony in this particular painting gets special attention, and we see a series of figures who are seated or placed around a roundish table. The table seems to be a sort of deformed object. In the center, you have a large figure, one who is clearly eaten its fill, who is being force-fed. But that central figure, flanked by the others, does become a little bit of a parody of the typical representations of the Last Supper. Sitting in front of this character is a bit of food, a plate of food that looks rotted, looks like an old carcass with vermin coming out of it. And next to it is a serpent which seems to be heading towards another one on the other side of the table. The most repugnant things anyone could imagine on a table, things you would not want to eat. And yet these souls, these figures sitting around the table, are all being force-fed. So the rotten meat being shoved into the mouth of the first figure, the female figure, her head thrown back, her mouth open, her eyes squinting shut as a serpent is being fed down her throat, perhaps reminiscent of those eels that were so omnipresent in banqueting tables and often led to overindulgence. In the lower left-hand corner, a man is being force-fed through a drinking horn. What was once a symbol of fun and amusement and drunkenness in the taverns now becomes the instrument of torture as things are as more and more and more shoved into his unwilling body. On the other side, more demons climbing upon the figures, feeding, forcing, suffering, making the thing that they loved the most a source of torture. The thing that's particularly moving about these medieval images is that they're produced during a time when it often happened that people simply did not have enough food. When people fasted in the period of Lent or the period of Advent, it wasn't just a question of taking away a few tasty treats. It was depriving the body of nourishment, which in many cases it was already not receiving in a sufficient amount. So this representation of people who overindulged in a world where people couldn't indulge also has a sense of drawing a kind of equilibrium in this particular age. Those who have too much, who repent, and those who have too little see that there's hope for the afterlife. The demons themselves are strange creatures, partially created out of animals, the spots of a leopard, the face of a monkey, the tail of a lizard. These strange chimeric figures, they are used a great deal in Last Judgment images to talk about human beings who leave behind their humanity in following their desires to the point of becoming like animals. And when Dante wrote the Divine Comedy and he placed the gluttonists in Canto 6 of Hell in this icy rain, they were surrounded by howling animals, howling dogs, barking animals, a continuous cacophony. So in this image with these open-mouthed demons yelling, mocking, screaming, you can imagine the double assault, the assault on their ears, the assault in their mouths, the assault on their bodies, which is merely an accentuation of the assault that they had already given to themselves. The open-mouthed demons in turn reflect the open mouths of the gluttonist, who spent their whole lives filling themselves with the pleasures of this world, only to find out that the consequences would be permanent.